Hello, everybody. I'm Tom White for Ngin, and welcome to Spotlight, where we showcase the innovations and best practices of our members across the network. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by JF Gauthier, founder of Startup Genome. JF, welcome to Spotlight.
Thank you so much, Tom. Good to be here.
So, JF, can you give us all some background on where JF has come from and what brought you to the point of founding Startup Genome?
Well, first, I'm Canadian, worked in banking, corporate innovation in the 90s, moved to the US 27 years ago and to the Valley 25 years ago. Really, I was a corporate exec and consultant for a while, banker, and then was named CEO of a client of mine, a software company. And since then, I've always been first executive or founder of a new business, and founded 5 businesses. Startup Genome was the 5th, 2 exits, 2 miserable failures. And Startup Genome in the last 6 years has been transformed from, a research organization that became a tech company that we sold to Sage. But we didn't want to lose this big research. It was the first and the only yet to date, done with Steve Blank 2011, to quantify the success factors from a data-driven approach, the success factors of startups and then of ecosystem, and really go deeper, following the lines of my professor, Michael Porter, with competitive advantage of nation. The industry clusters are important and how do they work? And we did the work in startup ecosystem and really and now we've become the world leading advisor of governments, trying to help them help us, entrepreneurs, right? So we're all entrepreneurs starting Startup Genome. And just like Tech City UK was with Eric Van der Klee going to Cameron and say, we're going to start helping you to make better policy. And that's what we did at Startup Genome. And now we're working in 45 countries. We have had like 100 governments and agency clients in the last 3 years only.
So I know that one of the core topics that you talk about is the scale-up gap. And the scale-up gap touches, as you said, the corporates, the governments, the startups. Can you tell us about the scale-up gap? What's the problem?
Yeah, so first of all, let's talk about the scale-up gap rooted in deep tech and even being greater in clean tech. And I used to do clean tech, right? 10 years ago, I was very disappointed on how slow it moved towards carbon credits, right? During the Obama year, all expected it was going to happen. And I was in renewable energy, of course, that was hot at the time, doing projects in Europe. And then 10 years later, right, as I see the threat to the planet, I was like, I need to bring the assets of Startup Genomes, which is my governments that listen to me, and start really shaping how can we help create big success that scale these great solutions that our community has developed so they have a big impact instead of a small impact because the revenues are low. So came back a year ago and started calling, you and the leaders of the Cleantech group and leaders all over the world to say, let's bring our networks together and see how can we make more of those big, great cleantech innovations become big companies that scale. Right? And we're like, we need to see 2 of the cleantech companies be 2 of the top 10 largest corporations within 10 years. We're going to create more unicorns, more scale. So we started putting our minds together, right, with Franz Nordau, it was the climate launchpad in Europe and others, and started as we were developing the strategy for Denmark to be the #1 green tech innovation, entrepreneur innovation ecosystem in the world. And so what is clear is that governments, corporations, and startups, we need to work together, right? Because as we saw right now, there's a great increase in capital flow to clean tech, but we've been there before and it didn't work. It's not about capital. It's about actually growth, creating growth. And so we need to work together within our networks of governments, corporations, and startups to solve the scale-up gap for clean tech.
I remember you saying that you were really surprised by the ROI in the clean tech space compared to the Silicon Valley tech space. Can you tell that story about what those percentages looked like and why you were so surprised?
Yeah, I had the chance to be talking to the head of a growth fund and the leaders in Denmark about their ambition, and we were looking at these stories that shaped clean tech. And Josh Lerner was one of probably the #1 expert in VC and PE strategies. Said, John Doerr's daughter cried when she saw the movie from Al Gore. Al Gore started working at Kleiner Perkins, a partner. John Doerr said, we're going to solve clean tech with the hundreds of billions of dollars that we have in Silicon Valley. And 10 years later, Josh said, we look at the returns and it was 2% over the 2% management fee. And in software, the tier one firms were at 35% return and hardware 25%, 2%. So it didn't work. It could not scale and create big success to create return on capital. So here we're in the same space, right? A lot of new influx of capital, but we still have the same scale up gaps created by lack of scaling skills in that community, right? The scaling skills of the software community is a very different community from the ideological driven, climate driven, social conscious community of clean tech. We're not brother and sister. We didn't go to the same schools, but we need them, right? Elon Musk coming to Tesla is one of the big reasons why he brought the scaling skills of PayPal and others and made it work, right? Scaled it. So that is important. And we have the problem, of course, of large and patient capital, but I think we're solving that. But then we have the problem of, not being able to have those markets being shaped to create demand, because the markets are very fragmented in clean tech. It's not like software. You go to London, San Francisco, Singapore, Shanghai, New York, and you cover 90% of the world because everybody goes there to buy. In clean tech, the utilities are fragmented by country and even more than that. And agriculture also, you have a fragmented market. And in software, you have unit economics benefits. You replace software, human labor that's very costly with software. You always have a cost advantage. In clean tech, you always have a 100x cost disadvantage, right? So how do we scale, right? So, and our governments work a lot on supply side policy, creating more innovation, but we need to stop. We need to work on demand side policies and get the corporations, the demand owners, really, to start being engaged. But the government needs to come in to shape incentives, change the incentives to guide the corporations to start creating markets and demand for these solutions and be forced to scale them. They're not going to do it because it's more expensive. They're not going to do it for their own benefits. So we need to get governments, who is our representative, to start creating those strategies.
So what I hear you saying is that if we focus on what you're saying are demand side incentives from the government, that then incentivizes the corporates to jump in to begin to create solutions, right? But then the challenge is, based on what you're saying, which makes a lot of sense, how can corporates convince their boards, their investors, that we're going to go into this 2% over 2% world and we're going to go and make a difference? How can corporates convince their supporters that that's what they need to do?
Well, that's it. I think the government has the power to create a market and tilt market incentives, right? Germany by itself created the solar and the wind markets, right? Just by saying, we're going to do it, even though we don't have a lot of sun, we're going to start doing it. We're just going to buy some solar panels, and those who make them will get better and better. And, Vestas was born in Denmark, right? And now it's like what I'm talking about is a demand side policy. Like, you're forced to have 1% of your concrete in all your projects for the city or for the state to be carbon neutral concrete within 3 years. In 2024, you need to have 1% in the ground, because my friend at Bechtel, we used to work at Bechtel, says we're not putting in anything in the ground, JF, that's not been in the ground for 20 years. So how do we start? Well, we need to force it, right? So the government says 1%, and in 2025 it has to be 3%, and in 2026 has to be 7%, and that's it, right? It costs, maybe that's concrete cost 100% more than the other ones. That increases their cost by 1%. They're not super happy with it, but they're going to do it. Or maybe you say 0.5% of your concrete has to be concrete negative, or you say, all the government R&D. 1% of the budget for the Ministry of Transportation has to be on startup solution, clean tech startup solutions. 1%, right? This is SBIR, right? It works. We've already done it. And so then the incentives of the board of the company is like, we need to do it. We're forced. We need to do it. How are we going to do it best? What startups are we going to work with? What technology can we scale, right? There's not enough being produced. How are we going to solve that? We have 3 years to solve that. And then they're going to start accelerating. And we can do that, right? There's tax incentives that could work. There's carbon pricing. there's 6 or 7 different types of demand side policies they can enact. But what I'm trying to do by coming back to this movement, we created the entrepreneurship for climate movement with Ngin and with Climate Launchpad and with the Cleantech Group and others, is to bring the governments to you, right? So you've been acting in clean tech, but I'm going to bring our governments to say, one country like Germany doing it is not enough, right? And we're not going to wait for the US and China, right? So we need 5 countries, 10 countries to say which technology is ready to scale right now, so that we can create a demand side policy that's enacted and is going to take effect in 2023, 2024, right? Small enough, but just to open the market and what Franz Nata calls the deployment-led innovation. Right? You start deploying a little bit, and then suddenly innovation accelerates, revenue of these companies grow, and more resources are pulled to it.
Yeah, of course. So US and China aside for now, where do you see the greatest sources of interest, cooperation, participation, innovation in the countries around the world that you're monitoring and working with?
Yeah, so we just launched the first global clean tech global startup ecosystem report to start really shaping the thought of where's the innovation happening and where's the scale happening, and to bring also the minds of everybody that it's not about Silicon Valley, it's not about New York anymore. And of course, Silicon Valley does a lot of clean tech. California is one of the leaders, and Silicon Valley is huge. But wanted to bring attention to the others. Right, number 2 was Tel Aviv, number 3 was Stockholm. Right, Sweden had 2 of the top 20. Number 14 was Gothenburg, Amsterdam 7, Berlin 11, Toronto 12. Denver, Boulder 13, Vancouver 16. That means 2 Canadian in the top 20. Right? Dublin 17, Helsinki 20. So smaller cities where a lot of people say, we're going to do this, right? And more conscious cities, communities, but also where governments is more conscious and more have made commitments towards net zero much more aggressively, like in Scandinavia, right? So it's not surprising that Sweden's up there. Sweden is the 3rd place in the world where there's most clean tech innovation, and the country is 10 million people. Is number 3, right?
Goodness.
So yeah, Canada is up there, and there's like 40 million people. So this is where we need to see, we expand our minds of like who do we go, what is this global community in clean tech, and where is it where it's creating really great innovation. But when I went to the Clean Tech Forum, one of my surprises that these great, amazing technology companies in clean tech that are raised Series B with great valuations have revenues of $1 million, $2 million. And so the problem, the scale-up gap is really easy to see, right? It's about scaling your revenues. That's what scaling is, and scaling your organization to create bigger projects and creating jobs, but also creating impact, most importantly, in climate tech. And it's not happening yet. So we need to work on that together.
Absolutely. Other than Tesla, which you mentioned, what are the 1 or 2 or 3 companies, clean tech oriented companies who have sort of bridged the scaling gap and who are succeeding in the clean tech space that we all should be keeping our eyes on?
I'm not an expert in the domain in startups. So I work with the governments and with organizations like you. So you're the expert, right? But I see a lot of, when I was there, like a lot of amazing technologies, right? And the problem is that they don't have a market because the corporation is looking at it as like, it's a great technology. If the government gives the right incentives, it's going to scale. Maybe we'll invest, but we can't buy these products and place a big contract because it's still 10 times more expensive than our traditional solutions. So what I want to see is really this ability to create markets with many governments. But secondly, is what we're creating is an organization called Apex that we created to solve also the scaling skills, like bring the scaling skills from the software companies where there's a lot of it as mentorship into the clean tech young climate-driven entrepreneurs to help them scale, right? So this is a program we're shaping in Canada and in Sweden, for instance. But you were asking where are the governments also taking leadership? Scandinavia, of course, but I see Canada, I see, of course, Northern Europe more. But what was a great surprise this year, and we saw it at COP26, is China. right? China realizing that actually for our own population, we need to do this. And we work with the leader of the National Institute of Policy in China. And last year, I was bringing leaders from my governments to talk about clean tech. I was very surprised when I asked him, what are your two top objectives this year? And his number two objective was clean tech, right? To start creating policy to grow clean tech. And they already have 250 incubators in clean tech in China. And he was like, these ambitious goals. And so that's really great to see, right? Because they're a major power, have major scale, top down driven country. When they want to do something, they can do it. It's going to be efficient, and that's really bringing a lot of energy into the space. Unfortunately, it's just happened, so a lot of the companies are very early stage, but I think this is going to bring also a lot of demand. So we open actually Apex China because we see the benefit of bringing the Swedish, the Canadian, the US, the European solutions into the market in China, because they don't have scale ups yet in clean tech because they never bet on it, and they need it because now they have aggressive goals. So this is really a new vector of change and of growth that we'll see.
Absolutely. So, JF, when people want to have a look at the Startup Genome ecosystem report, where can they get access to that?
Just startupgenome.com. Everything is free. So just click on get a report.
It's a remarkable report, and so you have the ecosystem report, and then you have the startup subsystem report, right?
Yeah, subsectors. So we break it down by subsectors. So we did life sciences, fintech, and now clean tech, and that was really a priority to do clean tech because of the urgency to solve this problem for the world, right? So that's why we're back into it, and we're focused on that.
JF, you make it sound really exciting. I feel a little reinvigorated, even though we're in this world every day. But I love the enthusiasm, I love the knowledge, and I love the connectivity that you're generating. So really, really terrific. JF, thank you for a fabulous, short, tight interview. Everybody can go to startupgenome.com and get a copy of the report. And we'll check back in again, and we'll see how things are moving forward.
Thank you so much, Tom.